18th. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Edgar.
Here.
Councilmember Gross.
Here.
Councilmember Kusamoto.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Murphy.
Here.
Mayor Graham Mejia.
Here. Move on to item 3, special orders of the day, the Civic Center relocation and preliminary discussions. I'm going to go ahead and open it for public comment on either item, limiting our comments to 3 minutes. Anyone in the audience who would like to speak, please come forward.
Can I withhold my comment for the second item when it does come forward?
That's fine. Okay, we'll go ahead and move on. Can we get this? Anybody else? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and move on. We'll go ahead and give it back to staff for the staff report, please.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council. We are here tonight for a workshop presentation. This is a follow-up item to one of the items that came up during the budget discussions, and Council had directed staff to bring this back. And this is the consideration of Civic Center relocation and a preliminary discussion on this, and we wanted to kick off the discussion with the Council. We've put together a staff report that is designed to initiate the discussion with the Council and provide direction to staff on which way to move, which direction to move. One of the key items that we want Council to direct staff on is if the Council wants to consider moving City Hall and associated facilities. And if there is consensus to move the facilities, then staff will take direction from the Council to move forward with the potential analysis that comes out of that. Tonight, included in the staff report, and the Community Development Director, Stephen Mendoza, will go through various sections that include a discussion about the value of the land and facilities that City Hall and the associated facilities are located on. There'll be discussion about the need to refurbish the aging facilities that we are here in City Hall and the other associated facilities. A discussion about the 9-acre site that's located immediately adjacent to City Hall, the Supermedia site, and review various options and locations for moving City Hall if the Council directs staff to move forward with the analysis. And this is not designed to get into specific discussion about locations at this point. There is the potential for the Council to appoint an ad hoc committee, which would then allow us the vehicle to explore various alternatives and other locations that the staff has been exploring. But really, we need to get the direction from the Council on if to move forward and how to move forward and discuss the options that are available. So we're looking for direction on either staying in the existing facilities, purchase or leasing an office building for governmental offices, or building a new facility. And analysis on all of these options is included in the staff report, and Stephen will be presenting that. And we're also trying to refine the discussion of whether or not to move civic facilities, narrow and identify the scope and critical issues necessary to move forward. From a fiscal analysis standpoint, right now we have $35,000 that's designated in the budget in fiscal year 14-15 for further studies depending on the direction that we go. And so with that, kicking it off, I'll hand it over to Stephen and he will go through the presentation.
Thank you, Brett. Madam Mayor and members of the Council, thank you very much for hosting this. City Hall land, when combined with our Supermedia Next site, is seen as a viable site for development. It's attractive to a lot of potential buyers for that reason. The 13 acres consist of city properties, sewer district properties, as well as the Supermedia site next door. During our recent budget discussions, the City Council had asked for a workshop to discuss Civic Center relocation and various alternatives. First, I'll discuss what's going on in the area. First of all, it's valuable Catella frontage that's never been taken advantage of. The City Hall is on property that has 60,000 cars a day traveling through it and could be considered very viable to commercial developers. The second is the facilities are aging. The third is that the 9-acre Supermedia site is now in escrow with a new owner, so something will occur on that site. These factors provide a foundation for a discussion about City of Los Alamitos civic facilities and the future of our facilities on this land. Assessment of the future direction poses many questions, possible options, and decisions. The goal of this discussion this evening is to refine the discussion to key issues, eliminate steps that don't need to be further considered, and maybe even be non-starters and narrow the scope of these critical issues necessary to move forward. The outcome will provide a program to address the top priority for the City Council and for City Hall and identify which future studies might be necessary in order to make those decisions in the future. The Civic Center as revenue-producing commercial land. Many consider the Civic Center valuable commercial land that could better serve the community as a revenue-generating property instead of its civic uses it currently has. Right now, as being the host of the Civic Center, it's exempt from property tax, so it has a property tax exemption. So we're not benefiting it from that means. We're also, as the gateway to Orange County, we're not using the potential of that 290 linear feet of property on Catella Avenue, which again generates 60,000 cars a day past this property. The civic facilities are aging. Since the development of the Civic Center, the population has tripled in our city. It was designed to serve a much smaller population. Office equipment and building codes have changed. Accessibility requirements have changed with the laws, and federal requirements are no longer met. It's been deferred. A lot of the maintenance has been deferred due to the speculation that we may leave here one day, and it may be better suited for commercial one day. And the Civic Center could transition to a potential commercial property owner one day. The Super Media site, you know, that's the next door site that started off as GTE, is now Super Media, but owned by Dex Media. So if we use all these words interchangeably, we know we're talking about the same 9 acres. It's currently privately owned. It's commonly known as Super Media and may soon offer similar development opportunities. They are now in escrow. They're in escrow with the Shop-Off Group. The future of this site, as determined by the draft general plan, is retail business. The City Council and the Planning Commission have made that determination previously. That is what's studied in the Environmental Impact Report for the general plan. The Environmental Impact Report is now a public document. It's being circulated until September 22nd. Once that document is certified, we develop comments. In response to comments, that document will go to the Planning Commission and then later to the City Council. We're hoping to have that done by November or December, depending on the Planning Commission takes 2 meetings or if the City Council takes 2 meetings. There's been much speculation over the past years about abandoning our site for a new site, and it's important for staff to provide interest parties with educated and informed responses. The topic has only been loosely discussed privately about moving City Hall. We've never been in a room like this and had all 5 council members provide us some input regarding moving City Hall and the feasibility of that. So this gives us the opportunity tonight to begin the policy level discussion about the reuse of the Civic Center properties. After an initial council discussion on the topic, it may be appropriate to develop a more solidified policy with appropriate background analysis, including the following components. We envision a needs assessment that which hopefully provide council direct answers to how much space each division of the community might need to operate elsewhere. A facilities program. What are the facilities used for and how are they used? Site alternative analysis. An analysis of each and every possibility of where we could go, both from a temporary point of view and maybe a permanent point of view. Does Public Works need to be near police? Does police need to be near City Hall? Does recreation need to be near any of the 3? So that kind of analysis would have to be provided to the City Council. Conceptual design, if you were to decide to move and City Hall was going to be built, we would have to enter into discussions regarding the design and the needs and the wants of the community and the council. We would also need projected cost estimates, a real serious internal cost analysis provided in real numbers of what it would cost to build these buildings that were envisioned through this study. And then financial analysis and apportionment strategy. How would we fund this? Would we look to bonds? We would look to savings. Where would we look to? Would we have partners in the group? Is there a potential to enter into development agreements or disposition and development agreements with our neighbors to the west or any other developer around town? Those are studies that we envision would be necessary to provide council the answers they would need to move forward on something like that. Mind you, those studies could be combined into one document, but those are the kind of answers we'd look at developing for our City Council. The City Council may also want to begin talking about developing an ad hoc committee. An ad hoc committee could give closer closer response to the city manager in addressing these concerns regarding this project. And certainly that's an option available on the agenda tonight, too. Now talk a little about the existing facilities. There's a table in your staff report that talks about what government offices operate out of our acreage here at City Hall, including council chambers, the police, the Public Works Department, the community center, the youth center, the TV studios, the storage, the break room building. People don't realize that the same building that houses the TV studio is the same one where our Public Works guys take showers and take breaks. All properties are owned by the city of Los Alamitos. Our future discussions regarding these properties would include prioritization of the project, discussions as to locations, the potential for co-location of city services, and the need to assess existing facilities and department needs in the process. That's what we think we were going to need in future conversations with the 5 council members. Each facility at the Civic Center will be faced with 3 choices: to stay in their existing facilities and eventually undertake a remodel and or improvement, to purchase or lease a building for governmental offices, or to build new facilities. And you multiply that by the divisions we have at the city, and you could have 15, 20 different scenarios of what could happen to each division. One could lease, one could buy, one could have a permanent home, one could have a temporary home. We don't know yet, it's still early. In 2008, the then city manager had entered into an agreement with LPA Architect Group to study a configuration of 70,000 square feet of civic uses. We're not sure where the 70,000 came in, but we're kind of adopting that as the square footage model. Of course, it would have to be vetted out, but we're just going to use it for discussion's sake in this. And LPA, through that 70,000 square feet of buildings, on about 9.5 acres over at the Joint Force Training Base between Little Cottonwood Park and the softball fields along Farquhar. And again, we're not sure why that land was selected at the time. We have the agreement with LPA, but we're not sure the why or the how that they came about. And those plans are included in your staff report. We provided those so you can understand the different configurations. But all the configurations have 70,000 square feet in them. The differences are there's some higher level plaza atmospheres and outdoor areas around them. And you'll show that they're all divided buildings, where that's certainly an option too, to combine those buildings and facilities as well. We're not sure right now if we would need 70,000 to operate the city. A lot of it depends on recreation, their leasable space, and what kind of space they would need. And also, if we had any, if we were doing this as a partnership, if we were going to bring the Chamber of Commerce with us, if we were going to bring the Sewer District with us, if there are nonprofits that wanted to have leasable space with City Hall, we're not sure what kind of partnership we would investigate at that time. But there are many things that could be on the table in negotiating. The value of the Civic Center land, I think, is of importance. In our analysis, relying upon market data presented and brokers surveyed, a value range of $44 to $45 per square foot is considered reasonable. Through our experience, we've learned that most of the vacant land in Los Al would probably be valued at a $1 million per acre. Cost of construction. Now, cost of construction with civic buildings is probably well known that this gets out of hand real quick by the time everyone has their hand in the cookie jar. Different divisions, different departments, different groups want different things when it comes to civic building. We'll have to make sure we rein all that in as we're going through this process and analyzing it. But 2 very common configurations have recently cost about $175 to $179 a square foot for civic buildings. And that is a California rate. The 2 examples are one example is from Orange County and one is from Northern California of that construction cost. But if you were to take that with the 70,000 square foot example that's in your site plans, you'd probably get cost of construction of about 12 mil. 12 mil, I think, is a very conservative number when it comes to building civic facilities. By the time you get your jails, by the time you get your locker rooms, by the time you get your city council chamber, you've outfitted with much modern technology, and I think that price has a lot of room to go up. And it does not include acquisition cost or even off-site improvements, curbs, gutters, storm drains, things like that that would be necessary to build a city hall in various locations around the city. We've also included a table that included some rental prices in the city. You'll see that there's both an industrial and an office cost on rental, but there's not a lot of comparable size buildings available in the city to house us in one spot. So we haven't included those because we wanted to give you a variety of what the market bears right now, but for both office and industrial, because it's most likely that City Hall itself could go into an office situation, but police and maybe Public Works could go into an industrial building. So that's the reason we gave you those two examples. Now, how does the Joint Forces Training Base play a role in this? For years, there's been discussions with JFTB leadership regarding the city having a presence at the base. By evidence of the attached drawings like you have, the discussions have gone on since 2007, 2008, and I'll bet you it went back to General Combs. He had a real planning mind, and he liked to forecast things and look at reuse of the base and with a community in mind. So I'm sure that had something to do with it, the way I remember General Combs. Now, future discussions that we may enter will include an assessment of our civic facilities. They pose many questions, possible options, and many decisions to be made by the City Council in the future. The goal of this item tonight is to refine the discussion to key issues and narrow the scope to these critical issues necessary to move forward. The outcome certainly will be a program to address all of Council's issues and to bring it back to you in a more formalized manner. We're going to have to dig deeper in each of these topics as the topics come up to Council. Council's going to want to know what sites are available. Council's going to want to know what kind of needs recreation has, what kind of needs police have, and we'll have to dig down into those researching those issues. Staff has the capacity of doing it internally. There's also special consultants that do this as well. The City Council has already placed $35,000 designated in the budget for further study. The monies have not been appropriated, but the City Council can certainly appropriate that at a later date. With that, that's a very basic overview of what could possibly occur with City Hall and the relocation, just to start the conversation. Now, mind you, we find it sensitive to talk about various sites that we may be interested in, because you may change the market rate of that site. If let's say that somebody wanted to bring up a discussion regarding a vacant bank, all of a sudden the owner of that bank thinks their property's worth a little bit more. So I want to caution everyone about talking about particular sites for that very reason. It could influence the market, and that market could try to influence our project. But with that, I turn it over to Brett or City Council if you have any questions.
Brett, do you
We'll
have
take any
anything?
questions that you may have. Just want to open it up for discussion at this point.
Warren, why don't you go first?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, City Manager and Planning Director. So, maybe a question for the City Attorney. At what point do we go into closed session when we start talking about real estate? Because I know that's one of those items we can take into closed session.
You can't take it into closed session until you have negotiations regarding a specific property.
Okay, but then, as Stephen said, if we were to be interested in a property, we might change the value of it just from that standpoint. So how do we?
It's difficult.
Okay.
And that's why staff is recommending that maybe 2 council members be appointed to discuss with staff, negotiate, get things going, and then once we get to the point where we can have a closed session, those 2 council members can report to the rest of the council.
The other thing, I guess, to Stephen, then, as I hear you speak about the different, I'll say, stakeholders' wants, needs, it just speaks to me of really a specification sheet of some type, because like anything, if one were to take a home remodel or a business remodel, you'd want to start with a plan, right, and specify that all out and cost it. So I'd like to make sure that those are one of those things that we get to see well before we even get to selecting a potential site, a property, or even costing, because I think we have to sort through all that, vet out all the needs and the wants, and make sure that we're agreeing to that, because all those come with a dollar, right, a price tag of some magnitude. And then not only that, but the future price tag of that we want to make sure that the five of us do the best we can to look forward and make sure we don't encumber the next council and the next council after that with something that's just not workable or unaffordable. That's not one thing I think that any of us want. So, making sure that we go through the specification process as best we can, making sure that we look at the current needs, the future needs that we see in terms of population growth and also changing demographics, right? Because as the median age might shift, we want to make sure we account for that, and then that'll swing back as time elapses. So we have to have some flexibility in that. But that's what I'd like to make sure that we vet out first, and then we can, I think, start looking at potential sites that will fit that specification. With that, back to you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Gross?
Thank you. I think I'm kind of the guilty person from the 2007 and 8 era that kind of got this started in discussions with General Jones, or General Combs rather, at that time. And based on discussions I've had with the city manager and with staff, my understanding at this time is that when someone comes in and says, is there an interest in relocating or the city hall getting off of this property, there's nothing that the staff has firm direction-wise that says yea or nay. During the budget sessions, I talked about the proposed items that were in the budget to upgrade, modernize, do things in the community center, at City Hall, replacing a floor, buying drapes for windows, fixing a bathroom, things of this nature. And I think we've come to a stage where I believe what staff is looking for is a commitment from the standpoint of the council, and hopefully we can provide that tonight, on the value of this property and staying here for the duration, whatever length of time that may be, or exploring the opportunities to market this property and find a different location wherever that might be. With the interest on and off over the last several years with the adjacent property that was talked about in terms of super media, it would seem to me that the combined 13 and a half acres approximately are more usable, workable toward an overall development. We're sitting on property that has no real property tax, with the exception of limited property tax from next door. We're getting no sales tax off of this acreage. And as staff has pointed out, it's 290 feet of prime location for commercial purposes, and to potentially offer new opportunities for our residents, shopping, things of that nature. So I would like to see us in this session with a direction to staff that says, put out the for sale sign on Catella. And if somebody's interested in next door, albeit it's still supposedly in escrow at the moment, nothing has been presented to the city of what that might be. But I'd like any potential developers to be understanding that this acreage is also available. And we're not looking at it being something separate. We're looking at it being a total opportunity and package. I think the idea of making that decision gives staff some direction to do the things that are needed, that have been laid out to us, and start working in that direction. Timing is an issue because for years that property wasn't of interest to anybody. There weren't options. All of a sudden there's a group of investors looking to do something with the property. And it's been nibbled on before. I just think we need, as a city, to say this property should be part of that property, and it should all be a contingent commercial development type of location. I believe the idea of the ad hoc would help staff to move in the direction and to help refine it and keep the council informed, much like we've done with other ad hocs in the past. And the location at this particular point, some of the unknowns at this particular point in terms of where we would go, cost of what we would go, I don't think are as generic right now as giving staff the direction to say, this place is for sale, for the right buyer, for the right price, and the right package in the process, and we're interested in doing that. If something happens that suddenly brings a buyer in this month, and they want to close escrow by the end of the year, getting out of here to do something like that would be difficult at best. But I think if we have that understanding, then we know what the next step needs to be. We know the next phase from the standpoint of looking for some place, whether the potential exists to use one of those buildings temporarily if other construction is going on. Whether there's temporary facilities. There was discussion at one point that a lot of the classrooms that the school district has are going to be available. The temporary classrooms are going to be available. You know, there's all kinds of scenarios and what-ifs. I don't think we're at that stage yet, but I think we need to start that momentum moving down the road, and I would encourage my colleagues to look toward the future, understand that we've outgrown where we are, not that we need a palatial situation someplace, but we're going to spend more money keeping this place upgraded and updated than if we find a different place and either retrofit an existing building or build something new. A lot of people have said to me when I've discussed this, well, how are you going to pay for it? Where's the money going to come from? To me, that's another phase down the line, because I think there's all kinds of options available. We can say what if on a lot of things, and I don't know that we'll be able to provide answers to them, but I think if we at least get the staff working, directions are going to come in, and maybe something else pops up over on Cerritos or some other location that would suddenly make this thing meld together. But as I said during the budget meeting, and for the last 2 years, 2 budget cycles, I've said the same thing. I'm not in favor of dumping more money into this place if the plan is to get out of here. And so we need to come to a conclusion, the 5 of us, is that the plan? Or is this just a pipe dream that I have that says we should get out of here? We should look for something else and let this property be a revenue-producing set of land for the community and future people that are coming into the community or our existing residents. So I'll pass it back at this particular point, but I'd like to make a motion at some stage.
Sure, great. Troy, would you like to go?
Sure. I'd like to frame this issue just a little bit differently. You know, what we're talking about here is a point solution for the city. And for City Hall by itself, numerically, I would agree with Councilmember Gross that maybe we need to move on and get off this property because of the potential revenue. But I think the bigger picture is that we need a more comprehensive approach to looking at this. And you know, I would look at it like this. If we just stayed at a City Hall move, the business case doesn't pan out. You look at the staff report and you can just see it's $3 million, you know, get out, or 2 to 3, depending on how you look at it. And it's probably 13 million, 12 to 13 million to build, and then the maintain on top of that. So on the surface, that doesn't look good. But if you step back from this and you say, hey, look, what are the bigger picture things going on in our city? We have a budget that is basically balanced, and we've got a good reserve, but we can't afford to now, after we've made all these budget discussions on the reserves, to be able to go and to expend a lot of money in the reserves, because now we're shoring up the pensions with that money. But if you're to look at a comprehensive solution, what would that be? From my perspective, you've got what I would say kind of a realignment of this entire corridor. You would look at City Hall, you would look at the major developments going on with the hospital, you'd look at the major developments going on next door and at the empty property, and you'd say, hey, look, those are potentially sources of funding. You look at what we have in the budget, of 40 grand this year to take a look at this for outreach, another 160 in the reserves. You sell the property, you start adding up all the sources of funding, you probably come to about $2 to $3 million. Then we make a bigger picture discussion and decision that says, look, the reality is if somebody came and the for sale sign was out there, we have nowhere to go. So the issue would be, what would we swing to? We really need to look at then is, if we're going to go to a bigger solution, we're also looking at reconfiguring the city. Right now, the city has a financial footprint that we need to decide if we're ever going to do something like this, which a lot of people look at as a symbolic move. We need to look at structurally, how can we change the trajectory of our financial future? And so if we were going to package something like this and just go for bond funding to be able to kind of bridge this for the short term, I think that would be a tough sell to the community because they're just thinking, I'm trading a stomachache for a headache, I'm not seeing the opportunity. But if we package this more comprehensively in a complete corridor project and said, hey, look, we have looked at how can we change the financial picture of how we generate revenue. The facility moving from here, not only in the sale, but in point of sale, property tax, utility users tax, for whatever goes in here and or can be packaged next door, is a component of the new revenue projection for the city. You take this and combine it with stuff that we've talked about on the revitalization of the corridor and being able to look at how can we structure the city to be able to be more able to generate point of sale revenue and property tax by having people invest in their property. And as an example, psychologically, we have the hospital, we have the banks, we have a lot of stuff that's being built, and at the same time we got development coming. I think that this thing is bigger than us making a decision just to go ahead and then put it on the shelf. If we were really serious about a comprehensive solution, we'd be looking at a bond package to look at reconfiguring, with the highlight of the story being Los Alamitos tries to change the financial trajectory structurally of where they're going for the next 20 to 30 years. And the City Hall would be a portion of it that we would talk about trying to use this as a revenue generation to get more revenue out of the existing site. So next steps for me would be that I kind of liked what Warren and Dean both said. Warren was talking about being able to have a very specific plan. I think that that's important, but I don't want to see that specific plan or the requirements getting put into a business case. And bigger picture, if you think about this, right now, when we were financing $100 million, actually $1 billion at the Sand District, the debt ratio on that was about 1%. We just got our credit ratings handed out to us through the city manager. We've got an excellent credit rating for the little debt that we do have. So let's just say theoretically that debt was at 1%. If we took a bond out, and this number is just pulled out of the air, so there's nothing to it, but let's just say it was $30 million, 12.5 for the City Hall, and the delta difference to change the structural financial picture of Los Alamitos, that would be a payment of $300,000 a year added to our existing budget that we would have to try and absorb. And what we'd be betting is that we would be able to generate revenue greater than $300,000, and that would be the business case. So if we really thought this panned out, just on the utility tax itself and the property tax and whatever else would be in here, and combined with what's next door and on the Blue Wed property and the hospital, all of that, could we break greater than a $300,000 for $30 million? I'm interested in the bigger idea of really making City Hall a part of a bigger package. And I do sense what Councilmember Gross feels is this sense of, oh my God, at some point we need to lay out a strategy. We seem like we're not too sure and things are going to start happening around us really quick, and we should at least have an idea. So I would hope and respectfully request that you guys, we consider a business case approach and look at it more holistically to change the financial trajectory of our city for the next 30 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Richard?
Yeah, at the risk of being the most negative one at the meeting, which apparently I'm going to be, I actually liked Dean's idea when I first heard it. Makes sense. The trouble in my mind is twofold. One, a $12 million building, when our budget's $12 million, it's going to be a tough sell. If we raise at $1.8 million projected, we raise about $5.5 million for a round number. even if we can buy land cheaper than we can get here, we're not going to get it that much cheaper. So if we have to pay for the land, I think we're going to find that we're then going to use 80%, 70% of the money we bring in from the sale of the land in order to repurchase a new spot. Personally, I don't feel that we're in any way near ready to move with the super media buy. My understanding of that sale is it's going to close this year. I just don't see how we could make a prudent move based on that time frame. Basically, to me, if the land's not free, it's going to be a very hard deal to sell. You used 1%. You think that's viable?
We had probably 90% of our 1.4 billion was that 1%.
Don't we pay substantially more than that at
We-
Laurel Park?
We do, but we financed it when the interest rate was 6%. We have looked at the COPs, the certificates of participation, to refinance, but we
Right.
can't get out of that
Right.
till 2016 here.
Okay. So I thought the number was going to be a little higher, like in the 3% range, but even using the 1%, it's going to be tough to get these details in place. However, I don't want to stop. I'm not suggesting that. I think that a creative solution is going to have to come along the way. Maybe we expand it as you're talking about. I mean, there's no doubt, I don't think that this land can be better used for something else. The basic trouble is we're already on it, we've got it paid for, and we've got a building such as it is that we own, and all we have to do is maintain it. That's a tough thing to give up. It's like owning a building when you have no loan, and all of a sudden you take the cash out, and now the building's no longer profitable. It's the reverse of that, actually. So we would, be adding a lot of cost to our budget. It'll be a hard sell for this city, I think, to build a $12 million city hall against a $12 million budget. But really, I'm just kind of sounding a warning, I think. I'm all for looking forward with this as we go forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, my comments will be brief. I agree with Richard. When I looked over the staff report, a couple of things that were surprising to me were the 70,000 square foot when we're about half of that. I understand, Stephen, that the city's grown, but really potentially there's only 2 square miles that need to be serviced because the base is 2 square miles of our 4 square miles as a whole as Los Alamitos. So I think that it seems like, and I know you didn't prepare that 70,000, that's something that was done in the past, but I think that there are some, ideas of grandeur within the staff report that maybe we wouldn't necessarily support. I know Dean has worked over the years with the base trying to secure the piece of property, as they said, between Cottonwood Park and the baseball field. When we had that brought forward, that made really good sense. We might be able to get a really good deal on leasing the land from the base, so there wouldn't be a cost for that purchase of land. If we sold this property, we could use that money to develop the new city hall. But to me, that doesn't seem like it's a viable option. And if it is, it isn't right now when we're talking about the Supermedia site. As Richard said, it appears from what we've been reading that it's sold, and I don't know how now we package this property as one. We really don't have the right to do that. They own the property, and then this is just a small portion of it. I know that we've looked at other locations, we've looked at the post office, things that maybe are not an option for us now, and I think that this is time sensitive, as we said, because of the property next door. I don't know that the idea of spreading City Hall over the city, different portions of it, the police in one location, Public Works in another, that just doesn't seem viable to me. I think when people want to be serviced, they want to come to the same location. They want to have all of their needs met, and this plan of potentially leasing or renting, that makes me uncomfortable too. I like the idea of what you've said about an overall picture, but that's something that takes a considerably longer time. We know that because of the general plan. And how long have we been working on that, Stephen?
Almost 3 years.
Yeah, 3 years. So this is not something that can be done in an expeditious way. You know, there was a property that came available over on Cerritos that we just found out about over at the baseball field when we were sitting down to talk. And I wish we had known that property was available at the time, because that would have been something that potentially we could have looked at, worked with the owners, and considered as a viable place for us to move if the acreage was enough. But we missed that boat, and that's no longer an option. As Richard said, that dollar amount, I just don't think in this economic time that we're going to be able to get our residents to tax themselves again to build a city hall that I don't think that they're going to think that we need. So for me, it's really very basic. The city hall may need to be addressed infrastructurally, but I think that it's acted sufficiently up until this point. As Richard said, I'm not looking to stop you investigating it. That's not my intent. But I, for myself, don't feel that if the base property is available, I don't see any other options for us moving forward with this in the long term. So those are my comments, and I'll go ahead and, does anyone else have anything else they'd like to add? Dean?
I'd like to just simply say, what I've heard are all good ideas and good concerns. If we don't take that step, we're never going to have answers to any of them. And if we don't give staff the direction to do something, we might as well just agree that we're going to stay here forever, and then deal with the crumbling infrastructure of the facilities and so on. I can't support that. The idea of looking at it at a bigger picture is something certainly that ad hoc and staff can do, because they're aware of other things that are going on in the community that may fit in. We're worried that because the Supermedia building is in escrow, that's a done deal. We've had other properties, including the 33 acres that was purchased and owned through escrow, that fell completely out and got bought back. I think the problem really is that when interested parties have come, including the company that is reportedly in escrow, they've not approached the city to talk about what their plans for their acreage is. If they realize that this acreage is available, then they can retool, redesign, and decide what they want to do. Maybe they purchase it. Through the ad hoc committee and through the staff report looking, what can be done to help displace City Hall to a different location. And the studies going on concurrently of what's actually needed becomes another factor. If this became high-end retail, as an example, the amount of sales tax that could be generated off of something like that would offset most of what we're talking about, even if we had to get a short-term loan. I'll remind you that we sat in a discussion, most of us, Rich wasn't there, but we sat in a discussion where we were told that Costco sales tax generates more money for the city of Cypress than the entire stretch of Lincoln Avenue, including Home Depot. We've had citizens in the past that have basically said the councils were kind of asleep at the switch and let things get away from them. I don't think that was the case, but I think we're at a point in time where we need to be looking toward the future. We need to be trying to decide what's going down the road, recognizing that we're limited right now on marketable, not us, the city, but the city is limited on marketable retail place. And developers are going to look at that to see the best way they can get money. One of the previous approaches was residential, and I know in one case it was looking to see what's the residential return versus the commercial return. Those are all things we need to vet out in the process of what we're doing. There have been discussions with the base in terms of a potential location there, but those haven't been discussed in a manner that we're in a position to be able to do anything at this point. But I will tell you, the interest still exists, more so now than back in 2007 and 2008. And so I believe that we need to give staff the latitude at this particular point to basically meet with people that come in, show an interest in the viability, and maybe they'll come in with a plan. Maybe they'll come in with the idea that they'll move City Hall someplace else at their expense if they get enough revenue off of this acreage in the process. I don't want to prejudge. I don't want to guesstimate from the standpoint of what we can and can't do. I want to be mindful of the expense and the cost moving forward, but I think we need to give staff that opportunity to move forward. And as I said before, I'm prepared to make a motion if you'd like to take
Mayor.
that.
Dean, why don't we let everyone have one last round, and then we'll go ahead and take that motion. Troy?
Sure, go ahead.
Thanks. So, thank you, Mayor, thank you, Troy, for yielding. So, I do like what Troy said about the business side, and then, Richard, I guess, the caution part. I'm going to look at the city attorney, so I'm going to use a fancy word, bifurcate. Is there a way to bifurcate this into two ad hocs where we might look at what are the specifications? Now, God knows, I'm an engineer, I love to solve problems, and I don't want to solve this one because that's your all's job, right? But I would like to help come up with the specifications and really drill down to what are the needs, and then I would then propose another ad hoc and look at where the source of funding to meet those needs. And so that would be an idea. Is that something that's solvable if someone were to make a motion that we could have two ad hocs to do two separate parts of this overall look?
There's no legal reason you couldn't have two ad hocs.
But I think that as we look at all of the gifts that we bring forward in terms of our ability to get things done, there are things that we can do that I think are very complementary amongst the five of us that might help to at least, if someone were to make a motion, we can handle parts of it to throw over the transom and then have the other ad hoc look at costing it out and then coming at what are the practical sources for revenues to address this. So back to you. Thank you, Troy.
Great. Troy?
I'm kind of looking at this as a Gordian knot. We got to kind of pull it apart so we can see what all the pieces are. So kind of consistent with where Warren was at. What I would like to do, if we could do an ad hoc like that, is first of all, let's just define the project on a couple different components. The technical specs is one, but you would look at the scope, and not down to the detail, but you know, in my world, if you were to look at this, you look at the scope and you say, hey, what is in scope? City Hall, corridor alignment, refinancing the Laurel Park debt, you know, and you kind of look and we just put some words behind each one of them. We're not trying to solve it, and staff would further define it. But this ad hoc would really break down the 7 components of this project. You know, we look at the scope, the timeline, the resources that would be required to do this, the risks for doing this, looking at stakeholders that are involved, the base, this, you know, all the components, and just in 2 pages really just lay out really defining the project, and then the City Hall piece specifically, the technical specifications of whether 70,000 is the right number or some other number. We can, you know, like we said, have an ad hoc committee that just delves into the City Hall thing because it seems to be the most priority. But what I'd like to see is after the ad hoc looked at the 7 components of this project and did the detailed specs on City Hall, I'd like to see a roadmap of time 0, time 1, time 2, time 3, and basically those times aren't specifically defined, but what has to be done before the next thing, so that any step that we take through this, we find that we don't waste a step. But if we do something, like let's just say, for example, that the scope, we define the scope to be the 3 components, refinance, all in the name of, under communication of the 7 elements, is we're trying to change the revenue structure of the city for the future. It's not fix City Hall, get a new building, it's all about restructuring the finance. But when you get back down to the scope, if we put those 3 things out there, we look at the roadmap and we see, you know, is there a serial path? Is there parallel? Are there dependencies? And in 1 page, this is, you know, what we do in corporations. You just look at this and you say, hey, look, here's the 5-year roadmap. Right now, we look at step 3, at time 3, and we freak out and say, God, we can't make that because the place already sold over here. Well, you know, it's going to take 2 years for that place to go through the whole process. They're going to be trying to figure out what project to do. Is that true, or is that just us intuitively saying it doesn't work? Once we have the roadmap, we have the 7 key components of the project. I really think a really simple business case for 1 or 2 scenarios would be important. We're not committing the city to any funds, but we'd say, look, there's the revenue portion of the business case that says how much revenue would come from a sale of a property, how much, for things in a transaction, and then what would come on an ongoing basis if we restructured the City Hall property and we restructured the boulevard and maybe parts of the city where it would be more conducive. What is the upside potential that we could have in revenue? Because really we're trying to build the story around revenue. And then we just compare the two, and then we say financing. Rich says 3%, I say 1%. We get somebody, the school district, if you just want to talk about precedent, they have a $100 million budget and they went for a $100 million bond. Obviously, our kids are really important and the community always, gets behind school bonds, but the reality is I'm not too concerned about the amount. It's what is our message? If it's to replace City Hall, I agree with you, Rich. I don't think we have a shot. But if we need to change the financial trajectory, then that's potentially maybe what our message is. And we look at the options, we have the roadmap so we don't make any false steps, and then we have a business case to kind of take a look and say, okay, financially, this thing really comprehensively does not pan out. It does not work, or it does, but we're basically strapping future councils with the 30-year bond that they would have to deal with at the time when the interest rates are fairly the lowest that they're going to have in the next 30 years. I think something we got to get past, because I know you're shaking your head, Dean, but you got to get past the point of we can do this organically, or we can hope some developer gives us a high five and money and sends us somewhere. We're going to have to do a bond. If we want to move City Hall, I don't see where we're going to have a new construction. Can we take over a facility and have lease payments in a suboptimum location that's going to need a lot of work? I think we really are going to have to come to terms, whether it's $1 million or $5 million or $12 million, this thing is going to need to be financed. We do not have the money to be able to do what we're talking about today. And if we can get past that, I think then we can have more feasible opportunity to have a discussion. In the motion of wherever that ends up going, Dean or Warren or whoever's going to make it, I would be very supportive of a comprehensive approach. And look, you guys can placate me to get through the short term, and then you can cut out the comprehensive part once you get there. But I'm cool with that too, but at least I can see the comprehensive piece in there, and I'll support the short term of just moving from City Hall. So that's what I would put up as a recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Troy. Rich?
Troy, when you started there with the Gordianata, I thought you were going to say we have to pass it to see what's in it. I got very nervous for a second. I do want to remind the council that part of the reason we're here today is the timeline is very important because it's going to impact what we have to do for our facilities here, both short-term and long-term. Personally, I would bet on the over if it was a 5-year project to get a new city hall. I think that would be along the time frames of what we're looking at. I know when Stephen and I went out to Anaheim, it took them 8 years to put in a farmer's market and a hamburger stand in an old building. So it takes a while. I mean, for a guy who works with one other partner, anything at the city is frustratingly slow. It's just a completely different animal. But I think we do have to develop, no matter what happens here, we have to develop that time frame to see to give us a judge of what we need to repair in the interim. That's going to be the trade-off, and that's the reason that we suggested that this comes here first, is because if we do have a surplus, we need to know where that's going and what has to be done. And once we have a legitimate time frame of this is the best we could do, then we're going to have to work backwards as to what has to be done over at the youth center and the various buildings to at least get us to the minimum requirements is really what I'm looking for. Thank you.
Great. We have a representative, I think, from the property next door. Is that correct, in the audience here? Yeah. You want to step up for just a moment? If you don't mind me refreshing my memory, it was a residential development that you were talking about for the property next door. Is that correct?
Yeah, last year when we were under contract, we were proposing a primarily residential development with a little bit of retail. And we actually just went back under contract a few days ago. It was just last week. And we're looking, I just spoke with a few of our partners today. We're still tinkering with the site plan, to be honest, since it's been just a few days since we went back under contract. But we're contemplating a mixed-use design with both retail and residential. That would be our preferred plan.
Okay.
But it's still taking shape because it's been such a short amount of time.
Right. Well, I remember in some of those preliminary meetings that when I said we had, as a council, hoped for retail to go in there because it's a large piece of property, we're talking about moving City Hall,
Right.
that you only do residential generally. Is that correct?
No, we do quite a bit of mixed-use projects. We do industrial, we do both rental apartments as well as for-sale townhomes, condominiums, single-family, et cetera.
Okay.
So.
All
we do
right,
a
so
pretty broad
then it
scope.
wouldn't be a large development of retail, it would be a mixed use. Is really what you're looking to do over there.
Well, if I remember, I think one of the things you had mentioned last year is really placemaking, which is something I think we're pretty good at. You know, the city having a project that has a retail component but has a plaza and a seating area where people can really hang out and spend time. So when I say mixed use, I think what we're contemplating is trying to create a special place where the residential and retail fit together nicely, and there's a place that, instead of just a normal strip center where you drive up, you park in front, there's nothing really interesting going on.
Right.
It's a place where you can actually linger, you know, there's a cafe or restaurant or a plaza where people can sit down, even if they're not actually using the business, which would be
Right.
public.
Right.
So-
But I thought I remembered as we got closer, that seemed to be narrowing that area due to parking or something along those lines. But nevertheless, I just wanted to clarify for anyone who might be watching who's interested in this, imagine that, that it really was a residential with a little bit of retail mixed in, correct?
It was primarily residential.
Right, okay,
Correct.
thank you so much.
Sure.
Would you state your name for the record before?
Yes, it's Ashish Katana with Shop Off Realty Investments.
Thank you for coming tonight. And then, so to me, that doesn't seem like a viable option when we're talking about creating that as retail. And I know you're talking about a long-term, but I just wanted to make sure, just for points of clarification, the people who may be interested would know that. And then, Dean, I know that when we met with the base, not you and I, but when the city manager and I met with the base and we spoke to the general, they talked about if we were to get that piece of property and we were to develop it, that would have to be a shared use. Do you recall that, Brett?
Yes, it was Major General Jones at the time that was speaking on behalf of the base and interested in partnership if that type of a project went forward.
Right. It would be a shared use where if we built a city hall and we built other rooms that could be used, as was talked about by Stephen, for rental, shared yards for property, that would be part of the deal that would have to be agreed upon if we were going to go into that property at that time. And then in addition to that, one of the things that was a little disturbing to me, and not that I ever think that or hope that we would ever go to war to the point where that property would be taken back by the base. That is an option that they said we would have to consider, that we would no longer have access to that because it actually would be base property. Do you recall that, Brett?
There was discussion just about making the use of the property as viable as possible, and that making it as viable as possible prevents, hopefully, the potential for BRAC closure or getting on a BRAC list in the future. In talking with the base more recently, it seems less and less likely that they would get on a BRAC closure list, but that is something that was discussed kind of as an outside possibility and the desire to make it more viable with the partnership.
Right, I understand that, but one of the specific things that they mentioned that is in times of war, if they needed to, they would take full use of that facility. So for us as council members and leaders of our community, I think we need to make sure we take that into consideration when considering that piece of property. So does, Dean, did you have a motion?
Yeah. I would just say to Troy, you know, you've dished up a whole conglomerate of stuff here, and my focus at this particular point is to give staff the opportunity to take a step and move forward. And the idea of ad hoc groups make sense, but I think we have to get there. Your discussion on the base, we're not even there. And we're not even with the potential buyers next door. All of that is nice to know, but it's not generic to what we're talking about. So I'd like to make a motion that the council directs staff to move forward on an idea or a concept to relocate City Hall to a different location, to offer opportunities to those that might be interested in this existing property that would be beneficial in a long-term type solution, and that the council appoint an ad hoc to get that started, with the idea that subsequent ad hocs would be needed as we develop more, and that that action and plan come back to the council within 90 days.
Do we have a second?
I'd like to make a substitute motion.
Okay.
So I'd like to, as Councilmember Gross said, I think the ad hoc perhaps look at it in a different set. The direct staff to come up with the overall roadmap, not a lot of detail, but that looking outward. And then as part of that, the relocation of City Hall, which would be more of the immediate thing. So not only look at the, and I think want to fold in Laurel Park with that as well. So we'd look at the refinancing of Laurel Park when we're able to, which would be a couple years down the road. The 5-year out in terms of the bigger picture, but not a lot of detail. And then within that bigger picture, that relocation of City Hall. And that way, I think the ad hoc, and actually I'm going to say 2 ad hocs, one for the overall roadmap and City Hall specific, and then the other one is the financing part, so where we would get the revenue. So that'd be my motion. Starts a little bit complicated, but it is really a overall long-term look with I'll say that roadmap for the footprint, as Councilmember Egger said about the revenues, and then the other part is the within that, the relocation of City Hall.
Okay, so we have a motion and a substitute motion. Do I have a second for
Is
either?
when you say relocation of City Hall, because we have identified in the staff report City Hall and other facilities at the campus. Are you talking about the campus, or because, as Stephen also mentioned, it can involve parts of it going and parts of it staying? So I just want to clarify that, if it's just City Hall or
No
just...
specific direction. I think it's everything or pieces of it, so I'm
How
not
can
trying
parts
to...
go and parts stay? Brett, if you don't mind, how can parts leave and go to different locations and parts stay if we're talking about selling the entire property?
Well, if we're talking about selling the entire property, then we have to go. If we talk about keeping certain facilities here in partnership with a developer, like if the Public Works facility stayed, or if the community center stayed because it's next to a park, I mean, these are all things that, at the staff level, we're talking about, all the what-if scenarios that are there. So, and then Stephen had mentioned selling or renting and locating the campus together or locating it in pieces throughout the city. They're just all considerations to make.
Yet to be determined.
Yes,
But
it
we're at
would
least
be.
moving that
It would be yet to be determined.
Okay, so do we, Troy, go ahead.
Well, I think in Warren's motion, Dean, I think you get what you want. You just need to be compromising with us that it's the bigger picture, and as long as we don't slow it down, I think that that's a fair compromise.
And I'm willing to second the motion. However, I want to have the maker of the motion understand that throwing refinancing Laurel Park into this motion or into this statement, which he did, kind of takes it a step further. I think when we get to the financing subcommittee, that becomes a topic for that on the overall plan, but the plan of the feasibility of moving off of this property and potential other sites.
So I may try then a clarification.
Okay.
Okay, so it'll be the overall roadmap that will comprise of 2 separate ad hoc committees, one to look at the roadmap and the more immediate concern of the City Hall complex, and the other part would be the financing of whatever changes that might be recommended. So it's very broad in that sense.
I'll second that then.
Can I get a clarification?
Sure.
I would ask that in that, for both of you guys, we have the outreach program that's going to be spending money. Outcomes of these ad hoc committees could pose questions to the community that if we were going to go out to get information from the community, we should try to package those on a timeline that they all work together. And so if you're open, I'm open for expediting the City Hall part, but on the business case and roadmap, in there, talking to the stakeholders is really important to me, and I'd like to try to see, because combined, that's $75,000 worth of potential opportunity to take a big step, as long as we meet your timeline requirements.
Can I just clarify that on, Councilmember Edgar, on the, at least on the outreach that you're talking about, what we have budgeted right now is $40,000 in the 14-15 budget for the analysis, initial analysis and outreach on Los Alamitos Boulevard. So you're referring to that and then combining that with the $35,000 that we have designated, and we can appropriate that at a later time. But is part of the motion to be able to use that entire chunk for analysis and studies? And
Well, I don't, like I said, I don't want to be making Dean more fearful than he is. I think where I'm looking at is there's an outreach component of the Boulevard project. I don't know if it'll consume all the money or a portion, so I don't want to get crazy, but whatever questions come out of the ad hoc that may need community input through the outreach, that when we put together this roadmap, maybe step 2 or 3, which is conduct outreach, we just make sure it's after complete ad hoc committees. And, that way we've taken everything in consideration. And then I would just say one last thing, Dean. I will struggle supporting anything on the movement. I'm just one of 5 for City Hall unless I could figure out how it's getting financed. So the business case to me has as much relevance as where. You notice I didn't make one comment on where, because honestly I'm more concerned about how do we pay for it. With that, thank you. I'm done.
Dean?
And the last part, I would just, for clarity for how this gets packaged and goes in, I would refer to the project area as the Civic Center and not City Hall. Civic Center, I think, would take care of all of the properties that the city owns at this location, so if that's agreeable,
Yeah.
we'll use the wording Civic Center.
Great, so is staff clear on what the
And just,
motion is?
you mentioned the Laurel Park refinancing, that would just be a part of the overall review of the financing
No, I
piece,
was,
or just
that was
take
not part of the motion, that was just a suggestion, so I don't want to make that inclusive or restrictive, so.
Okay, and we will, just in terms of due diligence of staff, continue to look at those options and bring that information through future budget process.
Can I ask a question, though, on that? If you look at that as one component of restructuring the financial picture of the city, and you could refinance 5-6% debt with 1% and package it at the same time we're trying to do the City Hall, there would be money or revenue upside on that. So I think Warren's giving you open berth. You can go as wide in there, and if it gets too we also know that you can't do it by 2016, so if it tilts towards Dean's timeline, we've got a constraint there.
Yeah, and then in terms of an overall financing package, if it becomes a bond that we have to issue, we have to identify the collateral, the revenue stream. That's
Wouldn't that
all
be
part
talked
of it.
about more specifically in these? Okay,
Yes,
so
that
let's
would,
let's
if we
just,
could add.
I didn't mean to cut you off, Fred, I apologize. So we have a motion, do we have a second? I'm sorry, I can't recall.
I second.
Oh, second. So all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? You abstain. So that's 4, and 1 abstention. All right, moving on to the second item of the day, which is item B, discussion of the cable function and the future of Los Alamitos Television. Staff report, please.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council. This item is also a follow-up to items that council directed staff to come back in a workshop format as a follow-up discussion on the overall cable function, including the potential of use of current and future use of the studio, the discussion of legally what is the minimum that the city has to provide with PEG funds. We're opening up this discussion tonight. There's really 3 different areas that we want to talk about. We want to talk about the cable function overall. We also are bringing forward 2 recommendations from the Cable Commission from their last meeting that they, on 2 separate motions on a 4-0 vote, recommended, 1, to bring forward a list of equipment for the cable studio, $39,000 that is included in your staff report, as well as asking the council to direct staff to go back and look at and research the potential for live streaming video. So that's one piece. The cable function discussion is another piece. And the third piece tonight is because we recently have found out that Mr. Strother, who is in the audience tonight, is not going to be filming and producing the sporting events for Los Alamitos High School, we did go out with a request for proposal. We did receive one bid back, and we do have a recommendation tonight to enter into an agreement with a consultant to provide those services for the upcoming football and basketball, primarily for the upcoming season. So I want to break this into parts. I want to talk about the overall cable function, the dealings that we have with the Cable Commission, what the Cable Commission has been involved in, what staff has been involved in, and then I also, from a legal standpoint, will have Carrie talk about what we legally can or need to require with the PEG funds, which are the $1 per household that we currently receive, which is about $30,000 annually. And then I'll have Glenn, the Interim Director of Administrative Services, talk about the financial history of the cable fund and the use of the PEG funds, and open up then the discussion and the dialogue with the council. We would like to get direction from the council on the whole scope of where you would like to see us move in the future with the cable function, and we want to give options to you tonight. So in terms of, I provided in the staff report itself just a summary of the things that the staff has been involved in, and I just want to continue to make the city council aware of the staff time that goes into this with working with the Cable Commission, and that is included in your report. I'm just going to pull that up right here. We do have, I've estimated about 10 to 15 hours monthly for my time, for the city manager, to prepare staff reports, agendas, and analysis for the Cable Commission, cable-related activities. There has been time spent by the city attorney on legal analysis of the appropriate use and spending of the PEG funds. The city attorney also has looked into issues that the Cable Commission has requested a legal analysis for whether or not advertising or obtaining sponsors for LATV is legal, and various potential fair political practices committee issues that the attorney has looked into. There's also been monthly time spent by the police department secretary, basically to prepare the agenda, to record the meetings, and prepare the minutes of the Cable Commission. Financial analysis by the interim director of administrative services and the accountant, and time spent on preparing those reports and support to the Cable Commission from a financial, and the city manager from financial analysis. And there's been additional staff time recently. Community Development Director did help me develop and really he put it together, the scope and the request for proposal for the proposal that we have on your agenda tonight for the filming of the sporting events. And so that has involved his time as well. So I just want to make the council aware of the time that the city staff does spend on it, and then talk about the future of Cable Commission and the scope, whether or not you want to move forward with equipment for the studio, and look into what the legal requirements are and financial history. So that's my part of the presentation. We'll take questions and feedback from you as we go forward, but I wanted to have, I do want the city attorney to go through an analysis of legally what's required.
Can we discuss what you just talked about?
Sure.
Okay.
Well, before you do, Dean, if you don't mind, I'd like to open it for public comment. I know there are some people here who are involved with LATV, and I'd like to give them the opportunity to speak if they would like to. And if you gentlemen would give me the opportunity to surrender the floor to me before we go on to the next person, that would be great, so we don't get people talking over top of each other. Would you state your name for the record, please?
I'm John Underwood, Vice Chair of Los Alamitos Cable Commission, and I'm here to talk about this item before us in a workshop format, especially with particular regard to the first item, which is the allocations, the two items that were unanimously approved by the Cable Commission recently and forwarded to the City Council for approval. They are the $39,000 for core cable equipment to complete the upgrade of the LATV studio, and also a second initiative also unanimously approved by the Commission, which is to look into the future possibility of streaming at LATV. Two very important aspects of LATV's outreach to the community. One, the studio upgrade, I think the more imminent and impending issue. We have a number of producers, community producers in the field who are waiting, literally waiting at the door of LATV for a completed studio so they can come in and be part of an overall community solution, fabric of the community that LATV has been working very hard to reach out to for the last several years. We've been part of many different efforts with the nonprofits in the community, struggling with the basic and incomplete cadre of equipment that we have at LATV for both field and studio use. We think at LATV that the studio is the most efficient way to be able to matriculate community producers in and out of LATV and be able to get their message out to the community and LATV's outreach to the community and our mission fulfilled. We think the studio is the most important way to do that, and we think that that $39,000 will complete the studio upgrade of basic core equipment that will allow us in a very efficient manner, not just to facilitate a dozen or more producers. I have a list of a dozen or more community producers who are ready and willing and have actually presented letters of intent to me, and I'm happy to turn those over if anybody is incredulous about that, who want to become part of the LATV community and get their message out. But in a larger sense, what it does for LATV is it puts us on a course of creating a marketing plan that will get us out of the hole that we're in, that will begin to put us on a footing where LATV becomes a marketable entity, not just for the immediate community, but for those potential sponsors in West Orange County and even in Long Beach, because now we're broadcasting in Long Beach, who would come in with sponsorship dollars but expect in return a professional product from us. We think the studio is the most efficient way to provide that kind of effort, outreach to the community. We also think that LATV, and in view of all of the initiatives that are coming forward, the city is moving toward in the immediate future with through Compass Blueprint Project and the Downtown Redevelopment Project, but also, as all of you have talked about previously, with the development of a new civic center. We think LATV can be part of that, too. We've worked with the city, with its agencies, rec department, with the police department in the past, and promoted all of these agencies. And we think the studio is the most efficient way to do that. And we hope that the council will join with the LATV Commission and approve that $39,000 in the immediate future, and also help us to create an outreach and streaming communication network that will take us even further down the road with the city of Los Alamitos. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else who'd like to speak? Okay, seeing none, we'll go ahead and bring it back to the council.
If I can continue on, I'll either
Sure.
council comments or questions at this time, or I'd like to have the city attorney give
I have
his
some
analysis.
questions on what you presented, and I'm a little concerned from the standpoint that you've made it clear that there's a staff member from the PD that takes notes at the commission meeting. Isn't there a staff member from the city staff that takes notes at every commission meeting of all the different commissions?
Yes, there is.
So that's not unusual.
That's
Okay.
common every meeting, every
Okay.
commission, there is staff
And
support.
and you've indicated that you're spending 10 to 15 hours a week
No, it's per month.
per month, okay, working on this, so that's additional staff time. Is there not a staff member that's assigned to every commission within the city?
There has, I just want to make the council aware that,
So
I'm the support to this commission, and so it just takes away from other
But
projects.
where does it say that the city manager is a support person for this commission?
Where does it say?
Yeah.
It's-
Well, I mean, was that
it's
part of-
where it falls right now at this time. It's where it falls in the organization.
I don't see that as being generic, because I think, the cost factor, and you and I have had this discussion, the cost factor of what we're paying a city manager is not cost factor to be the staff person for the commission. In previous years, there was a staff person that was assigned to the commission, and it wasn't the city manager. The previous two city managers have taken it on their own to do the same thing. I wasn't on the council when that occurred, but I, for one, as one of five, am not in favor of the city manager being paid your hourly rates to be sitting and dealing with that particular commission. And I would hope that direction comes from council to have you assign someone else or hire someone else if we continue to move in that part. I find it wrong that we're building a case of not doing this because of city staff time and costs, including the city attorney that you're bringing up, when the city attorney provides staff time to other projects, other commissions the same way. They do not staff the Parks and Recreation Commission with an attorney, and yet if a question comes up, it's asked by the staff person for the city attorney. So I don't see that, again, as being a generic cost.
The model is comparable in some way, but the scope of this in terms of the revenue that's received on an annual basis for the cable funds, the PEG monies, the $1 per household is $30,000 a year. And so I'm just pointing out, and I'm not trying to make a case one way or the other, but I am just trying to factually present the resources that are involved in a function that brings in $30,000 a year, and then explaining from a legal standpoint what the requirements are of that PEG money and then what the financial history
We
is.
deal with 4 other commissions that don't generate specifically money, although the Parks and Recreation Commission does produce revenue by direction with the race and the base. And I'm just concerned that we're trying to maybe mix apples and oranges in the particular process. I'll leave it at that because I don't want to get into a dispute, but I think it's wrong that you're trying to build this case that this commission, which doesn't really have the responsibility of the PEG money coming in, that money comes in as a result of the franchise agreement at $1 a household, and that can go up or down depending upon the subscriptions for Time Warner or Verizon.
It can go up and down, and like I said, we're trying to present the facts, and we're just trying to lay it out and receive council direction on moving forward, because I know there's been many discussions on this in the past.
Understood.
Can we let him give his financial analysis, or do you need to do it right now regarding what was
No, but if my proposal goes, you won't have to worry about that.
Okay. All right, so we're going to pass it to Richard. He's got a proposal.
Yeah, I'll put this in a motion if you guys are in agreement. It struck me over the weekend that our problem here is we're in the weeds big time on a problem that nobody wants to be involved with. So it hit me, our problem is leadership here. What we're looking for is leadership. Let's go out and get a leader, and here's how I propose to do it. We put out an RFP for anybody who'd like to run the studio, okay? They address the following proposals, the following positions: operations, daily programming, monetizing the current assets, availability for public access producers, and maintenance. Distribution, how LATV and other local programming will be available to the largest audience. How best to use the capital surplus fund. A plan for sustainability of LATV. How such an arrangement benefits the cities and the local stakeholders. And finally, an overall view of the future of LATV. And I think we let the professionals who are in this business tell us what they think we should do, rather than the 5 of us who, frankly, speaking of 1 of 5, have no idea. I would rather be fielding the proposals from professionals and acting like a board of directors, giving them 6 months to a year to implement what they want to do, with the ability to hire and fire them. And I just think that's a much better use of our time.
Warren, do you have anything to add?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. So I think on this one, I do resonate with what you're saying, Richard. I think that makes a lot of sense. However, I guess I just kind of wonder the curious thing about this one to me becomes risk and liability, because we have something that actually can touch people in ways and actually offend them. And I think, as we know in the past, there's been some extreme actions that had taken place through different legal entities. And in your thought, what does that leave us open to as an entity, as a city? Right, because that's something we'll have to deal with if it goes sideways the wrong way. So, whereas the 30,000 per year, even to what Councilmember Gross is saying, 10 to 15 hours, that's 10% of the city manager's time. It's not how we would want to see him spend 10% of his time, and I hope to God that he bills the PEG monies for that 10% of the time that he spends on the per hour basis, because that's just time. But that's just, what, can't do it? Oh, okay. So that comes back to how we spend the money. But the professionals that will look at that, the sustainability of it, the part about it is as we talk about the next item on this topic, I know in the RFP it offered for loan to any of the bidders the equipment that we have in the studio to go and film the high school sports. So that opens us up to another liability, any kind of a bailment agreement that we would want to create, the transfer of the liability, the hold harmless that we would want all in place for that. Again, is to protect us and limit our liability. So there's a whole gamut of things that just speaks to me of lots of risk in a lot of ways. So I'm kind of for it, but I'd like to see, maybe this is something you might want to model after the Museum Association and their obligation to us, how they're supposed to do yearly reports through their governing model and the revenues that they're going to obtain, and then how they go out and provide value to the community and that resource that the city owns. So something like that might be palatable, but I would want to see some kind of
Funny as you say that, because as I discussed this idea with people over the weekend, that was held up as the model.
Okay.
Let's try and do it that way, to where we are more of an oversight than trying to decide which equipment.
But on the other hand, we have to appropriate the monies, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Troy?
Wow. This has been going on for years. So I came on the council in 2006, and as it was discussed, we had a lawsuit with the ACLU on behavior that we had issues with, and we took a bad action from the city, and then we had to fix it. We disbanded LATV as a corporation, and then from there we said, hey, look, we'll provide leadership and get this thing guided on its path. Just to say form of history, and Rich, I've got a couple questions on your proposal, but I just wanted to set the backdrop for people that haven't followed it as close as we all have. After we did LATV for 2 or 3 years, going nowhere, having a lot of issues, during the middle of that, the funding changed. We used to be able to get a significant amount of funding on PEG. We made a change out in our franchise agreement from Time Warner, and we added Verizon, and when we did that, we may have cut ourselves a little bit short by opening up competition, which is a good thing, but the bad thing is we could have continued to maintain that the annuity level had we not brought in competition and just let Time Warner have the franchise. That being said, now we're dealing with a new model that we can't afford this. One of the questions or points that Dean made was that this is a function that's subsidized by our taxpayers. So just like Parks and Recreation, 68% of our cost is recovered, which is pretty high, or at least on the pool side of that. But on this, we're always going to be in a deficit. We tried having the city manager come in and take over LATV the days of Jeff Stewart, and that didn't work out too well. And it always comes down to the same thing. There's two factions within LATV. They fight, the city manager gets sucked in, politics get involved, and in the end, no one wins and no one's happy. We fast forward through that, then we said, we have a really good idea. Why don't we give this to the real experts in our community, maybe not the external experts, but let's have the commission do it. Let's find the best, smartest people in our community and give this problem to them. And we will provide appropriation, and they will provide policy direction to us as recommendations. In that same thing, all we've seen for the last 2 years is the factions going back and forth, not being able to agree. One of the things I was really encouraged when I seen the staff report is that commission actually agreed on something. in a 4-0 vote, they had 2 actions they moved forward. And to stay consistent with what I've told that commission from the very beginning, borderlining on the edge of, I'm not even sure if we can continue this LATV thing, because even council time takes a tremendous amount of time for us doing a poor job that we are. But they agreed on 2 things, and my commitment to them is if they could just agree on how to allocate their investment going forward, we have over $100,000 in our general fund to be able to help them outfit at a way. If they decided to push all in and spend all $100,000, then they're short-sighted. They'd never be able to get money in the future because there's no way to make up revenue here unless we have a new source. If they go too shallow and not enough, then they don't have the capability to run a studio or film football games or do whatever. So let the experts decide the 2 extremes and decide which path they go. So what I see here, and I'm going to ask you, Brad, is I see a recommendation in this for $39,000 that seems to be unequivocally or unilaterally agreed to by that and sent back to us for appropriation. Is that true?
It's the action, the recommended action was to take it forward to the council for recommendation to approve the 39,000. If the council did provide that direction, it's over the dollar limit. We'd have to go through the due diligence on the according to our purchasing ordinance, which the Cable Commission is aware of that. So that part, yes, I
So
mean, that's what they've recommended, but it's all part, and I've told the Cable Commission, because we were coming back
Yeah.
as part of the discussion during the budget, and we were having this analysis that I would bring this item back and bring the other item back for the consideration of the streaming video. Those are the 2 items that they did unanimously approve bringing
In the
forward.
streaming video, I didn't have the privilege of being there, but I got to read the very exciting staff report, which was the streaming video didn't have support. That seemed to be kind of the new perspective, but they even coalesced behind that. Looked like they brokered a deal between streaming video, really kind of led by Shelley Hesselbrink, and the other side of this, of the capital expenditures, and they came, both of them, I mean, short answer is yes, they brought a unilaterally or unanimously agreed on recommendation. So I'm struggling with, is this the beginning of a commission that's starting to work together, or is it time to call in somebody else and try to have them reevaluate this? On the let's bring in somebody externally. I am with Rich on that, but the shortfall there is funding. And so Rich, just a couple questions so I can explore that a little bit out in the open. Are you looking for a long-term, somebody to come in? Because that's where I think Councilmember Gross might have been going. A long time ago, we actually approved 15 grand, gave the commission to the city manager before Brett, just to be fair, and said, go bring in somebody that can help run the day-to-day. Maybe not to the extent you went, but definitely. And I was personally frustrated that that never took place. But 15 grand is half of the funding for this. Are you thinking just, or is it a recommendation? Somebody externally comes in and gives like an audit evaluation of here's what to do, next steps, and then we have another discussion.
It is, well, in your RFP, you would make the case why you should run LATV, and here is your vision for LATV, here is the budget, here is the future of LATV also. How are we going to sustain this? I think we all want to sustain this, but we're worried it's not going to be here. If we blow the 100,000, then we virtually have nothing. Then we're spending 15 people's hour on a $30,000 committee. That's what I'm trying to avoid. Mm-hmm. The person who comes in with the RFP is going to have to show us how they're going to make a profit, rather than us try to figure that out. I'd rather them tell us, here's what we think we can do. We can sell advertising. We can fill up the space with stuff that's already in the can, in the files to use use the space.
Okay, so it's a long-term solution using the RFP process to really show us the best you can.
And
I'd
I'd
let the
hope
lawyers sort out whether it's real or
Yeah.
not and legal.
Yes.
Okay.
But I would hope that the person who does it is with us a long time. But of course, we're going to get an annual report or a 6-month report probably the first time around to see where we are. Are we happy with how it's going?
Is your perspective or recommendation at this point or motion a lot different than Dean's on the $15,000 to put someone in there in an interim, or at least, I won't say that, Dean, I won't say that's yours, but I know when we had talked before, we were wondering, God, why don't they just get somebody in here that can be independent and take some of the pressure off the expensive resource that maybe knows TV, can adjudicate through the issues as you're talking about. Are you guys saying the same thing? I mean, is that a recommendation that you both are supporting?
I'm not saying that, but so that we're in concurrence with the discussion, I'm going to second his motion. And then the next phase of this would be, what you and I had talked about was the idea of taking half of that money. If you recall, during, and I was not on council at that time, but during the time that they did bring somebody in, they were paying $2,000 a month out of that $30,000 to an outside company to run the studio. And so money at that time was available.
Okay, so thank you. I think I got better understanding. Now back to Carrie. Part of what I'm interested in is your legal assessment, and I'm not sure if I want it tonight or after we would get some help, because the questions that I think I'm interested in, some of the biggest ones have been funding and getting creative. Even our RFP that's a part of this package is kind of interesting because it says, hey guys, we're with you, $6,500 and let us raise the rest of the money. Well, if it's that gosh darn easy, we should have thought about that a long time ago. Larry, I've read his message he sent to all of us, and hey, look, if don't be hoodwinked here, the quality is less, the number of production people are less, but right now, a less production is better than no production, which seems to be our other option at this point for sports. So I guess with the idea, I'm there. I think legally, the questions would come out of how would the responses come back in RFP, because if somebody got really outlandish, then we would ask Carrie, is that real? Can we really do that? The biggest question that I've had through this is, PEG at a minimum, what is the legal requirements for us receiving that dollar? We have a specific scope that we have a duty to pertain to do, and that part is got to be really understood when we send the RFP out, because if we send the RFP out and we say, look, and that's where I thought I was going to go probably a different direction than you, but I'm starting to get on board, is we need a discussion on scope then, because if we're on narrow scope, PEG only, then that's one thing. If, PEG does not have an allotment for football games. It says you provide a facility and hopefully it picks up in the community and everybody goes and gets it. So is the scope of this something that you're open to, or are we just trying to get as creative as we can? Are you concerned about that as the legal requirement first and then the add-ons after that?
My most optimistic point of view is somebody comes in and blows us away and says, you actually have in today's atmosphere, you almost have an operating television station. You could be doing this, 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 and this, and I'm going to make $50,000 a year, and you're going to be happy to pay me. It's like your guy who goes out, your top salesman. Might make more than you, but he's earning it. And that's the same situation I would be looking for here, that whoever is going to, they're not going to do this for free.
Yeah.
We're going to recognize that up front. And so that way, whoever makes the RFP, and hopefully we'll have some competing RFPs, it'll be fair for everybody to have a shot at what their vision is. There's not that big a pool of people out there, I don't think, who are familiar with LATV that would be willing to even take on running it.
So, Mayor, last question for you as a fellow person of history here. I mean, I have seen a personal recommendation, or to all of us, and that wasn't personal to me, from Larry Strother, how this could be the greatest thing ever. I've seen the same recommendation from a different perspective from John Underwood and that group. Do you feel that you and I, and Dean to an extent, have seen this before of, hey, these are guys embedded in our community that said, I'll show you the best thing that we can do, and it always seemed to come down to a legal thing if, no, you can't. Do you think that we're off on that, or?
It feels to me like deja vu. It's like we've been through all of this multiple times.
Yeah.
And in defense of Brett, in all fairness, I think his point was we have spent an extraordinary amount of time and staff time and council time and commission time on these issues, just rehashing and fighting over the same issues. So to me, I have a different perspective than all of you. I think that we don't need a manager in the sense that you're saying. I think of Althea Miller, who went and did a traveling show, and she produced it herself, and then she turned in the product. Now, maybe that product was altered a little bit by the station people, but to me, that's what public access is. I don't know that we need to get so engaged in having a fully running studio. I don't know that that's what we're expected to provide, and so I'm on board with you with that. There was some information, Brett, regarding a new source of money that might be coming through legislation. Have we tracked that? Do we know anything more about it?
There's a CAP Act that's out there. The city council did take a position, a resolution to support it. It would, if it passed, Congress would bring additional revenues into the cable function, but it stalled. It's
So there's
been held.
Okay.
Actually, it would just allow the $30,000 that we get to be used for programming as opposed to studio and equipment.
Oh, okay, great. So it would a larger latitude what to be able to use it for. Okay. Regarding the lawsuit, I think that is a big concern, Warren. I'm glad you brought that up because when we first came on, Dean, you too, I don't know that the leadership at the time took inappropriate action, but it was definitely illegal. There was some strange programming that was going on, and they looked to protect the community via some complaints, and so it does put us in a compromised position. Rich, you talked about, I think it was you, I apologize if it wasn't, the studio. We had someone managing the studio. It ran well. It was done for a minor amount. It actually came in under budget, but because of all that strife between the two entities, that was no longer continued.
Wasn't me, I think it was Troy. It's never
Oh, I
run well
apologize.
while I was here.
Yeah,
so.
well, I'll tell you that it came in under budget. We had more productions that we'd had ever in the past. And I know that John has talked about, there are people lined up to do productions, and I think that's great. But again, I don't think that we need to be so involved in it that we need to provide a studio. Maybe equipment that we could allow usage, but even then, we face some issues, John, like you brought up repeatedly. If they come back broken, what do we do then? So for me, I think that a very minimal approach when we talk about the PEG part of it for LATV is that the studio can stay as it is, that we use the equipment that we have unless something's broken and we can't afford it. We encourage those producers to produce their own shows and bring it in-house. And then if we need to pay someone to do editing or something along those lines, maybe that's what we look at, because I think that's something much more affordable that we could fit into the budget that we have per year. And I would just say that I don't see this changing. I honest to goodness don't see it changing. I think it's the same argument, the same dispute, the same fight, time after time after time. I would love for us to keep the station open in the sense that people can come in with their own productions and we can put them on our station. Maybe, Rich, like I said, I agree with you to some level that we have someone in there doing that, but I think we have someone who works for the city who's, able to do that in addition to recording the city council meetings. I don't think that we need to go out and find a manager. I don't think that we need to spend $38,000. I think we need to protect that revenue for as long as we possibly can so that in the future, if things do break, they can be replaced. So I've been on the ad hoc committee, just as Troy says, just to frame it up, almost since the inception of it. And I've had some real issues with people who are producing and receiving money from the city, also being on the commission, and I think that there's just a myriad of issues with this whole process. So to me, I don't agree with the staff report. I do like the idea of live streaming because I am a person who has DirecTV, so I can't see the council meetings, and I think that if we get into the more current times with the more current technology, the streaming does add a benefit to our community for those of residents and businesses who are interested in seeing what we're doing here. They have that possibility even if they don't have the users that we have for Verizon or Time Warner Cable. So to me, my recommendation would be to keep things as they are. If there's broken pieces, replace those, look into the live streaming, and maybe talk to our current employee to see if he has the opportunity or the time to do any kind of editing for productions that would be brought in by potentially people who are producers that John talked about earlier. Warren?
I may go back. So one of the things, I guess, as I further listened to what Mayor Pro Tem Murphy had said, it's almost like if you were to look at this entity like a CBS or an ABC, a for-profit entity, right? I mean, a self-sustaining, bring in revenue, sell advertisement. And I think along with that goes some regulation. So there's FCC compliance, right? I mean, you know, obscene materials and what have you. So I think the regulation part becomes kind of a challenge on one hand. The revenue stream that comes in, but if we were to, and I think this is, I don't mean, correct me if I'm mistaken, but if you just take this whole thing bundled up and saying it's a private entity, go out and make money, go out and create programming and then put it on LATV3, is that kind of what you're suggesting?
No, I don't, I'm not that far along.
Okay, okay, but that's kind of what I'm, as I think about the, you know, again, the devil's in the details and that kind of stuff. And then I go back to, it'll be, you know, us that kind of gets that liability, that gets kind of the people that we're going to come after, the city, right? The city that will happen to us. So I'm, you know, I'm not sure if that's the right way to go in terms of just turn the reins over to somebody. And
Well, actually, if I may, just real quick, what the mayor said and what I'm proposing are not mutually exclusive. The mayor, we may get down to, this is all we want to do. My proposal is, let's look at the RFPs, look at what outside experts say we could do with the station, and then as a body say, you know what, that has too many problems, that doesn't work. We're going to go bare bones. And believe me, I would support that at that point. If we can't come to find that person, then bare bones is probably the next best answer. I'm just saying, give people a chance who want to take a shot at running it, and in 2 months we'll know.
yeah, but I think part of that, and I think we still haven't heard the two other parts of the staff report would be the legal aspects of what we can and can't do with the PEG monies and the PEG monies themselves. So I don't know where we go with this. I don't know if we're ready to make any kind of decisions. I think I would want to hear more of that before I would, you know, be supportive of what you're suggesting. So there's a lot of moving parts as it is on this part, as on these matters. The other thing, I guess, two other points. I'm going to ask about the direct community video, which I think we should decide on because I think that's probably something that's more time sensitive, and the existing studio itself, which is a collection of content, material, old tapes. The last time I saw it, which was a couple years ago, it was kind of like how my office at home looks, full of stacks of stuff and not well organized. So would that be a fair characterization of the studio, the media that's in there?
Yeah,
There's
I
VHS
think
tapes,
so.
VHS
There's tapes, there's
and-
shows, and
And I don't know how
Mr.
many
Underwood
VHS
would be able to,
players-
he's the one that
Yeah.
spends the most time in the studio, be the best one to speak to
But
that.
VHS
but-
tapes, U-matic tapes, all the old format that's disorganized in some sense, right? So I
and some-
think,
the equipment is there, and the equipment is being proposed to be upgraded, so.
and so I would think that one of the things that we would want to look at from an archival standpoint is what can we digitize and store wherever it would be, a server in a cloud or whatever have you. I think it's part of the other thing we need to look at, sort of the retrospect look, is what we have. And if not, maybe the records retention is that we just throw it away, and that's fine too, but I think that just needs to be addressed in the whole thing. So those, and then the last point, again, I want to bring up is I think we need to take action on item number 2 because of where we are in the cycle, and I would just ask the council to, maybe we need to consider that. Back to you, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay. The one thing I will add, there's been some talk about advertising, and in those ad hoc meetings, there was the offer of potential advertising, only it wouldn't be done, it wouldn't be sold. And there was always the threat, well, if that happens, then, there's potentially going to be a lawsuit because you can't sell advertising. So I just want you to understand the level of breakdown to which these meetings came to. And so we only have a couple more minutes before the regular council meeting starts, so City Manager, we have an item on the regular agenda, don't we?
Yes.
We have it on the regular agenda. We also do have, I just want to point out, the consultant that submitted the bid on the sporting events, the filming and producing the sporting events, is in the audience, is available to answer questions to the council, explain what his proposal is all about. And it is a more time-sensitive issue in terms of the filming and producing of the sporting events, since the first scheduled game, and it's September 5th is an away game, and then I think September 12th is the first home game. So time sensitivity, that's why we wanted to get that one on here too. We were fortunate to get one bid. If the council wants to go forward with that project, the consultant is here to explain what the service is that he could provide, and that could be a standalone while we continued, and the council continues to discuss the other items to provide direction to staff.
Troy?
Trying to take into consideration Rich's recommendation and Warren's timeliness. The one component is the legal assessment of the feasibility of a consultant to come up with a creative way or this vendor to actually sell advertising to offset. It seems like the nexus is they're coming together. I would make a recommendation that we wait for the city council portion where you have it reserved in here and start with the legal assessment so that we can have an idea, is that feasible? I mean, can we get really creative on the scope part and then on the advertising so that when we listen to this proposal, I feel a sense of urgency, but I almost feel like, we're going to make a decision that actually then kind of usurps half the budget of what the proposal that we're talking about on your side, Rich.
Yes.
No. Oh, yeah.
You know, the proposal that's here was pre-done and sent out based on advice from the prior person. It also says, because we have $6,500 coming into the city from the franchise with the public, that's all the money we're going to pay. So, hey, anybody out there, can you do it? Can you do it for $6,500? And a respondent came in and said, yes, I can. The part that I don't like is the fact that we're offering equipment, including the van, and other equipment that has broken down in the past, that we've repaired when it breaks down, even when it wasn't being used for a city-approved activity and event, and we've just repaired it. And I don't
The
think
particular consultant that submitted a bid is proposing to use, you nod your head, proposing to use his own equipment. So the filming and producing would be done all with that company's
as long as
equipment.
that's clear in any contract that we sign, I think that's fine.
But doesn't it strike you guys odd is that an outside company can come in and raise money mysteriously and get government money that should have, like, attachments to it? Larry Schrothers can get $6,500, do a kick-butt job for the bunch of years,
Right.
but who knows what funding came behind that? But we, don't ask, don't tell. And now we're worried about Rich's proposal, which, let's go, directly and mainline it into the vein of, hey, let's have this person report directly to us because there's a problem that if we know too much and it's illegal, we shouldn't do it. Well, it's illegal if it's illegal. We need to find out where, what the parameters are. I mean, is it less illegal
tried.
if we have another company come in and promise to raise money to use government-provided or public franchise fee money and do advertising on PEG?
Just a minute, Dean,
So,
hold on.
so
just a second. I'd like to speak
I'm
up.
struggling with that until I can get an answer on the legality.
Right, well, we're going to have Larry come up real quick, but just to
We've already
summarize,
closed public comment, and we're 5 minutes out. I recommend that we...
Troy asked some specific questions that Larry has direct knowledge of, so I think that it's appropriate to allow him to come up and speak with regards to those issues, not just go ahead and talk about whatever he wants, but to answer the questions. One of the things I want to just summarize before we move on, and Larry, I'll give you a second. Troy's asked for us to find out what our responsibility as far as PEG is. I think that's important.
He does.
Potentially have a,
That's the attorney.
Dean, can I finish? Potentially have someone come in and audit, as Rich has said, what needs to be done, what we need, and then we can make a better decision moving forward. So with regards to the questions that Troy posed just now, can we get a real brief answer because we're going to be starting the council meeting in a couple of minutes?
Yeah, I just want to address, TJ's proposal. I personally think you should do it. I think the issue is, there's two things. You guys are talking apples and oranges. He's going to come in with all new equipment, which is the way you can do it nowadays and do it the way he's editing. Troy was saying something about advertising. We have that already adjudicated. The PEG rule is right in there, says that sponsorship, advertising and stuff can be used when it's used to support PEG programming. That was already adjudicated. The previous city attorney went through it numerous times. It was in our contract. That should be a non-issue. There's no way I know that you're able to afford doing those games. We had we had like 6 guys working a crew. It's a whole different ballgame.
Okay.
So that's why we were using the equipment, and we could not do it on the money. When I got the money from CDS, I originally went to them apart from the city, and I got them as an advertiser, as a sponsor. Later, Angie then tried to get a bigger package, and that's what happened.
Okay, thank you, Larry, I appreciate it. Okay, so what's the decision of the council? Do we want to continue this to the regular meeting?
Yes.
Okay, so what we're going to do is go ahead and adjourn this meeting and continue the item to the regular meeting.